Joan of Arc's early life and divine calling. Joan of Arc, born around 1412 in the small village of Domremy, France, emerged from humble beginnings to become one of the most revered and iconic figures in history. Known as Jeanne d'Arc in French, she was born into a peasant family during one of the most tumultuous periods in France's history, the 100 Years' War between France and England. This war had ravaged the country for nearly a century, and much of northern France, including Joan's hometown, was controlled by English forces and their allies. Joan's upbringing was modest. Her father, Jacques d'Arc, was a farmer, and her mother, Isabelle Romee, raised Joan in the Roman Catholic faith, instilling in her a deep religious devotion. Joan never learned to read or write, but she was known for her piety and her unusual sense of conviction, which would later shape her destiny. Little did anyone know that this peasant girl would rise to lead an army and become a pivotal figure in French history. Joan was just 13 years old when she experienced her first divine vision. She claimed that she heard the voices of saints, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret, instructing her to save France and to ensure that the Dauphin, the French crown prince Charles VII, was crowned king. At first, Joan was unsure of these visions, but the voices grew more persistent, and by the time she was 16, she believed firmly in her divine mission to liberate France from English domination. The political situation in France at the time was dire. The French monarchy was weakened, and the English controlled large parts of France, including Paris. The situation worsened after the 1420 Treaty of Troyes, which disinherited the Dauphin and declared that the English king, Henry V, and his descendants would inherit the French throne. The treaty effectively united France and England under one crown, leaving Charles VII as the unofficial and disputed king. Joan, filled with faith and determination, sought out the Dauphin. Despite her lack of military experience and her status as a commoner, Joan was resolute in her belief that she was chosen by God to lead the French forces to victory. At first, it seemed impossible that anyone would take her seriously. After all, she was a young, illiterate peasant girl claiming to have received orders from divine voices. But Joan's conviction was unshakable, and her story would soon capture the attention of those in power. In early 1429, Joan managed to gain an audience with the Dauphin, Charles VII, after traveling through enemy territory to reach his court in Chinon. Legend has it that Charles, skeptical of her claims, disguised himself among his courtiers to test her. Joan, guided by her divine visions, is said to have identified him immediately, strengthening his belief in her extraordinary powers. Joan of Arc's military triumphs and the siege of Orleans. Joan of Arc's arrival on the battlefield was nothing short of extraordinary. In an era where women, especially young peasant women, had no place in military matters, Joan defied all conventions. After receiving the backing of Charles VII, she donned men's armor, cut her hair short, and took on the role of a soldier, ready to lead the French army to victory. It wasn't just her presence on the battlefield that was remarkable. It was her strategic insight, her fearlessness, and her ability to inspire the troops. In April 1429, Joan and her small army set out for Orleans, a city besieged by the English for months. The fall of Orleans would have been catastrophic for the French, but Joan believed that God had destined her to break the siege and turn the tide of the war. When she arrived, her mere presence sparked renewed hope in the French soldiers, who had been demoralized and on the verge of defeat. Joan did not simply observe from the sidelines. She was in the thick of the fighting, leading the charge, carrying her banner, and motivating the troops with her unwavering faith. Her courage on the battlefield earned her the respect of hardened soldiers and commanders alike. Under Joan's leadership, the French forces, who had been beaten down by years of losses, suddenly found themselves revitalized. They launched a series of daring assaults on the English positions around Orleans. Joan of Arc's trial, martyrdom, and legacy. After Joan of Arc's remarkable success in leading the French forces to lift the siege of Orleans, her legend grew rapidly. With her strategic insight and ability to inspire, she played a key role in a series of military victories, helping the French reclaim towns and fortresses from English control. Joan's crowning achievement came when she guided Charles VII to Reims, where he was formally crowned King of France on July 17, 1429. This moment was significant because Reims was the traditional site of French coronations, and Joan's role in making it happen was seen as the fulfillment of her divine mission. Despite these triumphs, Joan's journey was far from over, and her story would soon take a tragic turn. By late 1429, Joan's influence began to wane. After the coronation, Charles VII was less reliant on her, and became more cautious about pushing further militarily. Joan continued to advocate for more aggressive campaigns to fully drive out the English, but her calls for action were not always heeded. Her independence and her direct relationship with God were viewed with suspicion by some in the French court. In May 1430, Joan of Arc's fortunes changed dramatically when she was captured by the Burgundians, allies of the English, during a battle at Compiègne. Betrayed and abandoned by the same French court that she had helped rise to power, Joan was handed over to the English. They saw her capture as a golden opportunity to undermine the legitimacy of Charles VII's reign, which had been greatly bolstered by Joan's victories. Joan's trial began in January 1431 in the city of Rouen, which was under English control. Her trial was a political and religious spectacle, intended to discredit both Joan and Charles VII. Led by pro-English clergy, the trial focused on charging Joan with heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing, the latter referring to her practice of wearing men's military clothing. The English and their allies aimed to prove that Joan's claims of divine guidance were false, and that she was, in fact, a servant of the devil. Throughout the trial, Joan displayed remarkable courage and composure. She stood firm in her beliefs, insisting that her visions came from God, and that she had done nothing wrong in following their commands. Despite being subjected to intense questioning and threats of torture, Joan did not waver. The trial, however, was rigged from the start. The English and their allies were determined to convict her, regardless of the evidence or her defense. On May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc was found guilty of heresy and sentenced to death. She was just 19 years old. That morning, she was led to the old market square in Rouen, where she was burned at the stake. Witnesses to her execution reported that Joan faced her death with dignity and bravery, praying until the end. As the flames consumed her, she is said to have called out the name of Jesus, and her final words cemented her status as a martyr. Joan's death, however, did not mark the end of her story.